3, 2, 1. Yes. Hello, Boyan.
Hi there.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. And I love what you're doing. I've seen your TED Talk. I've seen numerous conferences that you've appeared at and discussions you've given on this. And for people to jump into this right now, what you've done is think long and hard and devise a method to try to clean up some of the plastic that we have floating around in the ocean, famously the Pacific Garbage Patch, which is this enormous patch of garbage that's between California and Hawaii. How did you get involved in this? And what you're a young guy. How old are you?
23 already. Yeah.
23 already? You sound like, oh my God, I'm so
Getting
old.
Yeah.
Yeah. How old were you when you started this?
I think I started thinking about this when I was 16 and founded this organization when I was 18.
That's crazy. All you lazy fucks out there that are 16 years old that aren't doing shit with your life, just think about this kid. That's amazing. I'm so happy there's people like you in the world.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
So you started thinking about it when you were 16, and this is something that is extremely disturbing to anybody that's paid attention, especially when you see the birds that have died with all these plastic bottle caps inside their bodies, and you see their carcasses with these multicolored caps in them, and they thought these things were food. It was just one of the many, many, many problems that occur when you have plastic floating around in just enormous numbers in the ocean.
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's really three problems with this plastic. First of all, obviously the ecosystem damage. I think there are around about 800 species that actually could go extinct because of this plastic pollution. Then there's the economic threat in terms of damage to fisheries, damage to tourism and things like that. I think it's around $13 billion a year, according to the UN. And then thirdly, there's the health impact or the potential health impact, because these tiny plastic pieces, they actually also end up in the fish we eat that take chemicals with it. And that ends up on our dinner plate as well.
So what was it that prompted you to dedicate your young life to this?
Sure. Yeah. So I've always been very passionate about technology and just building things. I think sort of having an idea in your mind and then seeing that become reality and being able to touch it and things like that. I think there's literally no better feeling in the world than that. So I've been building my own things since I was 2 years old, I think, first starting with things like tree houses and zip lines, but then going into sort of computers and explosives and rockets and things like that, which was a lot of fun, but it wasn't very useful, I would say. So it's kind of looking for something that real to work on, a real problem. And that's what I then came across when I was 16 years old. I was scuba diving in Greece, and I came across more plastic bags than fish. And I wondered, why can't we just clean this up? And that question sort of kept circling around in my head. And sort of thought about, well, how could we do this? The ocean is pretty big. And then eventually came up with this idea to use these natural ocean currents to basically let us collect the plastic.
And so how do you have many different prototypes that you started with and you eventually wound up with what you have now? And have you started implementing them yet?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so the concept that was presented back in 2012 with my first TEDx talk, and if you compare that to where we are right now, it's sort of day and night of a difference. Through testing and through all these prototypings, obviously there has been a lot of development there. But the key idea has stayed the same, that instead of going after the plastic with boats and nets, which will take around about 79,000 years to clean up just this Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Instead of doing that, we let the plastic come to us. So use basically a network, a fleet of very long floating barriers, which are oriented in a U shape, and they float around and they kind of act like a massive Pac-Man. So yes, like a funnel, brings the plastic towards it, the natural ocean currents push it against it, moves towards the center, becomes very concentrated, and once it's concentrated, well, then it's easy to get it out and ship it to land for recycling.
And has this started yet?
So the past, so we were founded, around 4 years ago. In that time, on one side we did the reconnaissance. So we mapped the patch with 30 boats and an airplane at the same time to really understand how much is out there, which turns out to be 1.8 trillion pieces floating in this Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And on the other hand, we've done all the testing. So we've done hundreds of scale model tests. We've done prototypes back in Europe on the North Sea. And actually, right now, we're manufacturing the first real cleanup system, which is scheduled to be launched from San Francisco to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch in around 2 or 3 months' time.
So has anything been used? Like, is there a proof of concept? Have you done like real large scale testing where you've shown that you can actually do this?
Well, I mean, we've done a lot of subsystem testing. So the prototypes in the North Sea, for example, were sort of these 12-meter sections, and we managed to keep that in one piece. So, but then, and also the plastic capturing, that worked very well in the lab. But yeah, the real proof, of course, has to come from this one real system in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch collecting plastic, and that's what we really hope to achieve this year.
So this is the big one, right? The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is the largest?
Yeah. So
between California and
Hawaii. Yeah. So there are 5 areas in the world where plastic concentrates. This is by far the largest one. There are 4 others, but they combinedly contain less plastic than this one in the North Pacific.
Why? Do we know why that is?
Probably because of Asia. So Asia has quite a big problem in terms of that they use a lot of plastic, but they don't have a good infrastructure. So by far the largest source of plastic flowing into the ocean is also this one continent, and what's being released there naturally because of the currents ends up in this North Pacific patch.
It's such a strange problem because it wasn't something that was discussed in the 80s or the 90s. It was nothing, and then all of a sudden, somewhere in the year 2000, I remember hearing about the massive amount of plastic we have in the ocean, and it just made sense. I was like, oh, well, of course it's going to wind up there. But the sheer size of it is staggering. Yeah,
and I think that to me the worrying thing is that it's a persistent problem. So with many other kinds of pollutions, when you sort of turn off the tap, it will be solved by itself. Think about, for example, the ozone hole with the CFCs. But with this, like if you turn off the tap, the problem is still there, and in 100 years it will still be there.
Right.
So I think to really solve it, you need to do 2 things. On one side, we have to close the tap. On the other hand, we also need to clean it up.
Jamie just pulled up a size comparison where it shows 1.6 million square kilometers, an area twice the size of Texas or 3 times the size of France.
Yeah, so this was a study we published a few weeks ago. So this was the result of that reconnaissance effort. And it's kind of funny, like every other news outlet used a different size comparison. So I think it was CNN that says it was the size of Mongolia.
Wow. We always use Texas.
Yeah, Texas is
We're
a good
America.
one. Yeah.
We use Texas for everything.
Yeah. 4 times California as well.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty big area.
It's insane, and it's getting bigger, I'm sure.
So the area doesn't really change. It's more the
concentration.
The concentration. I think.
When did we realize that this was an issue? Like collectively, scientists, geologists.
Yeah. So there have been sort of small sampling efforts since the 70s. So back then, it was the first time plastic was described as being something that floats in the ocean. But it really only entered the public consciousness, I think, in the late 90s. There was this Captain Charles Moore who was sort of sailing through it, and he saw this plastic, and he was like, well, we need to describe this. And then he did a scientific paper on it. And and actually, I think he was the one that termed the term Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
So he was riding his boat through it for a long period of time, I guess.
Yeah, I think he was participating in some sailing race, and he went through it, and then he just saw all that stuff.
So he was the sort of the canary in the coal mine.
I guess, yeah.
So what is it? One of those things where it's hard to get different governments to act on this because like who's responsible for the ocean? Yeah,
I think it's sort of this tragedy of the commons, right? Where it's international water, it's sort of everyone's problem, but at the same time, legally, it's no one's problem. So, and besides that, what I really felt when I started the ocean cleanup was that basically everyone wanted this problem to be solved, but at the same time, we didn't really have a way to do it. There simply wasn't any technology to do that. And that's why I thought, well, perhaps this is an opportunity to combine my interests of A, solving this problem, but B, also developing technology, which is then what we did.